for episode number 103 of the Cozy Corner of Cinema. This is being recorded on Friday, March 15th, 2024 at 11:20 a.m. and it is a wee bit chilly this morning, but let me tell you, yesterday was such an ethereal experience. There was no way that I couldn't talk about it. So I'm sitting there, man. I got the day off of work, so I'm sitting there watching some films, man. I got to watch some films to take some notes on for future projects and all that good stuff. So I'm sitting there in this comfortable chair, and it's a beautiful day out. The sun is out there totally painting the roads, painting the grass outside, just truly embracing us all in its light. And I open up the window, the cat's sitting in the window, he's falling asleep, he had a hard day, deserves a rest, and just feeling that warm breeze come in the room. It's not too cold, not too hot, it's just perfectly right, and I tell you, man, by being there in that moment and experiencing it at that moment was something that cannot be fully replicated with words. When you know you're in that moment, you must do what you can to savor it for as long as you can, because once it's gone, it's gone. Today is a little chilly. The sun's not quite as out. It's a wee bit cloudy out there, but that's all right, because we're going to go out there. We're going to make our dreams come true. We're going to fulfill what we need to fulfill in our lives, man. We're here on earth for a purpose, and only we know that purpose, man. So whatever it is that, if you got to go out there and you got to, work on your film, work on your directing, working on your screenplay, your music album, the next great American novel, whatever it is, man. It's just we must fully take advantage of each and every day that is given to us, because tomorrow is not given, man. So that is why right now it is such a blessing to be here, to be alive, and to experience these daily blessings that have enraptured us all. This past Sunday, of course, the Academy Awards were. And it was great to see Oppenheimer win Best Picture. It won quite a number of awards, actually. I originally had no intention of watching it live, because I don't like watching the commercials. I don't like watching the banter between, the Hollywood celebrities and all that. It doesn't interest me. But I was talking to an acquaintance who was talking about it. We were joking back and forth. So I said, you know what? I'm just going to put it on, and then we'll watch it. And then another acquaintance of mine was watching it, so I was in two different conversations about the Oscars all at once. And it was just such a great evening, man. Talk with these people. We're cracking jokes. We're talking about the films, talking about, oh, that's cool this one, that's cool that this person won, this and that. It was just such a great feeling, man. It was just, for being someone who is pretty bad at guessing what will win what, I think I actually did pretty decent this year. I had a score sheet I did just for fun that I truthfully didn't follow, but it was great. I predicted that Emma Stone was going to win Best Actress, and both my acquaintances predicted that Lily Gladstone was going to win, and it turns out Emma Stone won, and it was a well-deserved victory. But of course, Lily Gladstone was terrific as well. It's two different kinds of performances. Emma Stone is playing a much more broader, much more bombastic, and much more physically, not just with her physicality, but she's running around, she's jumping and all that. She's just being very active. Whereas Lily Gladstone has to give a very restrained, pulled back performance, very tragic and quiet, while experiencing the hardships of her life and the people in her life whom she has lost and is continuing to lose, as well as being aware of the person whom she's romantically involved with may not be entirely who they say they are. It's definitely two different kinds of performances, two different kinds of films, but the fact that we are getting films like this by great filmmakers like Yorgos Lanthimos and or Lanthimos. I don't know how to say his last name. Is it Lanthimos or Lanthimos? I've heard it pronounced both ways. And of course, Martin Scorsese is just a wonderful time. And it's great that, and I've said before, I wasn't, I liked Poor Things. I maybe wasn't as crazy about it as some other people, but even I can watch that film and go, wow, there's a lot of artistry there. It's great that we're getting a vision from such a great filmmaker like this. And, Zone of Interest won a lot of awards as well, and that was fantastic too. I think Jonathan Glazer is such a wonderful filmmaker, and this was such a great film, man. I can't even say I enjoyed it, because that's an inappropriate word to use, but just being there in the cinema and just taking in, such a visual and auditory experience is something to be truly reveled in, man. It was just so great to see that win a couple of awards. And ultimately, and the reason why I bring up the Academy Awards, because everybody's going to be talking about it, what they agreed with or disagreed with. Ultimately, what I'm saying here is going to lead into the conversation of the first film. is that with the Academy Awards, people talk about, oh, this film got nominated, this film didn't get nominated, this and that. I mean, regardless of what films or performances or anything like that get nominated, it's there are films that when 10 years ago that aren't as watched now as other films. And I'm thinking back to, like, I was just having a conversation with somebody yesterday about The Raid from 2011, and to me that's like one of the strongest. That's one of my favorite films of the 21st century. Didn't get any Oscar nomination, anything like that, and I'm sure what won in 2011. I think that was The Artist. Because they shifted to the next year. Because then sometimes like, oh no, that's 2012 because it came out in 2011, this and that. But I'm saying, I'm saying is that for that time, that time in 2011 when The Artist was the big film, that's the film of the moment, and whether or not it stands the test of time is irrelevant in that moment because it is just that moment, that present moment. However, X amount of years later, whether or not some people still revisit The Artist or still talk about The Artist is one thing, but I know for myself, I'm still revisiting and talking about The Raid. That's why I can't get upset. Getting upset about any kind of award thing is ridiculous, man. These are just presentations. Because you talk to some people who just get really upset about it. It's like, brother, it's not don't be losing sleep over this, man. It ain't a thing. They're films of the present moment. I mean, we talk about films that lost Academy Awards to other films, and that people talk about, oh, Saving Private Ryan lost to Shakespeare in Love, and Saving Private Ryan has been much more in the general kind of public discord than a film like Shakespeare in Love, or even a case like Raging Bull Against Ordinary People. People, still, I think, talk about Ordinary People, but it's not quite on the level of pop culture sort of appreciation as Raging Bull. I mean, Raging Bull is just is just one of not just one of Scorsese's strongest films, one of the strongest films ever, really, and that's okay. We're not going to sit back and go, we're not going to get upset about it. We're just going to, okay, Ordinary People was the film of that moment, but Raging Bull is the one that people probably talk about more. It's all subjective, and that's okay. Ultimately, it doesn't completely matter, but it is interesting to look at a historical kind of point of view of where it was, and that leads me into the discussion of. The Criterion Channel have put out a new selection of films that are called "And the Razzie Goes to ... And there's a collection of films on here, and to me, when I look at what gets nominated for an Academy Award as opposed to what gets nominated for a Razzie, I find the Razzies, and I don't want to be a jerk. That's not my intention on this show. If I'm going to use if you're going to give me your ears for 30 minutes or however long. I want to use the opportunity to turn you on to cinema. Next, I'm going to do here. But to me, when I look at films nominated for Razzies, I find it very, what's the word I want to use? I find it very smug. I find it very shallow. I think it's very shallow film criticism to dog on the hard work of other filmmakers. And I'm not saying that these films are exempt from criticism. That's a ridiculous thing to say, but if everyone is going to dog on, let's say, a new Adam Sandler movie, whether you like or dislike his movies, it's very easy to join the general milieu and the general discussion of, well, everyone hates this movie, so I'm going to hate it too. And it's a shallow way of thinking, because films are like wine. They age with time. And whether they get better or not with time is completely subjective. Maybe the wine comparison wasn't a totally, apt comparison. But you get what I mean, man, is that I watch a film like Ishtar, and that was at one point considered to be like one of the worst films ever. It bankrupted the studio. Elaine May didn't get a lot of work after that, it's all this and that. But then I watched it with fresh ears and fresh eyes, because I'd never seen it previously. And I'm thinking, you got Isabella Johnny in that film as well, and I'm thinking, like, this is just a comedy, man. I mean, I enjoyed it. I thought it was kind of a silly comedy. Warren Beatty and Dustin Hoffman are playing these ridiculous kind of characters who get themselves in over their heads. And to me, I'm thinking, like, when I think of the worst films ever, man, this isn't even remotely close. I mean, I can confidently say I haven't seen many films, and I've seen thousands of films in my lifetime, man. And I still have, hopefully, a long life ahead of me. Who knows? It's like I got to take each day, by the brass and really kind of enjoy yourself. I've seen thousands and thousands of films in my life. I can maybe only put on one hand the amount of films that I've gone, oh, I could confidently say that's one of the worst things I've ever seen. And that's 0.00 whatever percentage, man. I can truly, even films I think are terrible, I don't think I've seen more than a handful that I can go, yeah, that's one of the worst films I've ever seen. So when I see things like Ishtar on the list, and like, I watched like Cocktail, which is a silly movie. It's a tonal mess. The script is a mess, but it's got some charm. It's definitely a product of its time. But I'm thinking, one of the worst ever? Are you insane? And then you have films that I consider one of the best ever. I mean, love it or hate it, people have strong opinions on the Blair Witch Project. To me, that's one of the best films ever. That's it's an incredibly inspirational film. I look at films like that, and like Skinamarink, however I've heard it pronounced both ways. And whether or not you like or dislike those films should be inspirational, man. How you have, or Paranormal Activity. I know these are all horror films. What I'm saying is that you don't have a lot of money, so what can you do with your budget? And they create this cultural kind of sensation. Now, Skin America, not as big of a cultural sensation as the Blair Witch Project or Paranormal Activity, but I'm saying is that these films, whether you like or dislike any of them, like, worst ever? What? Like, these should inspire you, man, to make your own films. Like, oh, they were able to make this kind of milestone with what they had. I can do that, especially now with, during the COVID lockdown, people were inside their houses. It's like, well, what can I make with the resources that I have? It doesn't automatically mean you're exempt from criticism. But what I am saying is that when you see these stories of these people going out there, and instead of sitting around and talking about, well, one day I'm going to make this great film, or one day I'm going to write this great novel, they actually go out there and do it. And whether they fail or succeed remains to be seen. But the fact of the matter is that the risk is there, and are you willing to take that risk? Are you willing to put yourself in the spotlight for your art? That's up to you. But my point is that I'm getting at, let me get a sip of this beverage here. No coffee this morning. I already had my coffee earlier, and actually I probably should have made a second one, but that's all right. You don't want to be drinking too much caffeine, because there's been a couple times where I find myself drinking a couple cups of coffee and then an energy drink, and I'm like, brother, my heart is not on my side on this one, man. It's ridiculous. But I'm talking about this film that I've seen a couple times now. I had seen for the first time in probably 2022 or 23. Actually, it had to have been 22, I believe was the first time that I saw it. A film that has, at one point, been considered one of the worst films ever made. I've seen this film 3 times now, and it's one of my favorite films, and it's a film that has gained a cult following, and is on the Criterion Channel under their Razzie section, and it's a divisive film for sure, and it's definitely not an obscure film, but it's a film that has gained an appreciation that I think is rightfully deserved. It's a unique film in its own right, and has garnered many strong reactions one way or another. And it's Tom Green's 2001 written and directed and starring film Freddy Got Fingered. And it's a film that is so out there and is so wild that upon an initial viewing, I can only imagine the reactions that this had received upon a theatrical release in 2001. Because right from the start, it's a non-stop, extreme comedy, man. And normally a kind of film like this wouldn't totally be my sort of thing. Comedy is all subjective. I love a lot of dumb comedies. I love silly comedies. I love, but sometimes it doesn't totally work for me. There was a film that I watched recently that I won't say the name of that I wasn't totally crazy about because it wasn't consistent with its extremity. You would have these ridiculous moments that were over the top, but then they would try to hone it in more, and it never fully worked for me. But then I talked to some acquaintances who were like, oh, I actually love this film. And I'm like, that's great. You got something out of it that I didn't, and that's totally cool, man. That's why we're here to discuss these films, because cinema is any art is subjective. But with this film, it's so extreme from the start. It's a ridiculous plot. You have this main character, Gord, played by Tom Green, who is living with his parents, but he gets a job to go out to California to go work in a cheese factory. But he wants to be a cartoonist. The opening of the film is him laying in bed laughing at his own cartoons like a maniac. It's ridiculous. You have this ridiculous sequence where he's skateboarding through town to get to a bus station. And he's at this bus station with his parents, played by the great Rip Torn, as well as Julie Haggerty. And he's there with his brother, Freddy, played by Eddie K. Thomas, who, him and like Harlan Williams at this time, I always think of like the early 2000s when I think of them. They're just these kind of actors who would always pop up in these kinds of films, these big kind of studio comedies. But it's ridiculous, man. He's there. He meets his parents there, even though he came from his house. And he's getting on this bus. He's like, verbatim, the dialogue is like, you bought me a bus ticket to Los Angeles. Now I'm gonna get on this bus. And then Rip Torn, his father, stops. He says, wait, man, you're not getting on that bus because we bought you this new LeBaron car. And you're thinking, brother, why? Like, why even get him the bus ticket, man? Why didn't it's ridiculous? And you could chalk that up to, oh, that's poor screenwriting. Because no, that's not. to me, I'm watching this film and it's so intentional what it's going for that it's almost baffling that it's even perceived otherwise. Kind of in the same way that Starship Troopers, people say, oh, this is a pro-military film. And I'm thinking, my man, did we even watch the same film? Starship Troopers is so overt in its satire that it works as such a great comedy. I mean, Starship Troopers is a really good film. But you watch a film, and it's easier to look at this in hindsight and go, how could you not see how obvious this was now? But at the time, I can imagine maybe perhaps how a film was marketed, how maybe a film like this was marketed as another kind of, generic studio comedy, or Starship Troopers is just a generic studio action film. We have the hindsight in time that leads me to my point before, that when this comes out, of course you could say, oh, this is one of the worst films ever, but now we're watching this 20 years later, and it's like, what? One of the worst ever. This is so unique in its own right. So, I mean, the film is ridiculous. He goes to California, he comes back, and he gets himself in a series of situations while trying to pitch his cartoon. The film is so extreme with its comedy by going so over the top and so in your face and obnoxious that it's one thing to not like the comedy. That's completely your prerogative and all that. But by seeing what Tom Green is doing, by having these moments of extremity and the violence as well. You have a running I meant to say joke and gag. You have a running joke of a child who is viciously injured multiple times throughout the film. In any other comedy, it'd be like, oh, that's ridiculous, kid's getting injured and all that. He flies out the car door, or, he gets hit in the wall, but they show his face all bloodied and he's missing teeth and all that. It's ridiculous. I mean, it's so obvious what it's going for in subverting expectations and in putting it up to 11, where Tom Green is this guy at the time who has this popular show. He's like, okay, he's popular with the kids. He's doing, because he has this Tom Green show in Canada. It's like, okay, well, he was in Road Trip from 2000 as like the funny kind of side character. He's got his own sort of thing. Let's just let him do what he wants to do. And they even make fun of that in the film. I mean, it has to be intentional, where he's talking about, Anthony Michael Hall at the beginning of the film plays Mr. Davidson, and he's talking to Gord, and he's like, Gord, you're a good artist, but these make no sense. There's no structural flow. There's no clear narrative. This is ridiculous. This is stupid. There's no comedy here. And then later on in the film, Gord goes back to him, and nothing's changed, man. He pretty much does the same thing. These are my cartoons, and all of a sudden he's like, you know what? This is genius. Here's $1 million for your cartoons. And you can't not see that as the production of the film, man. Clearly the executives because this was a Fox film, so they clearly were like, okay, we don't get the comedy, we don't understand it, but hey, here's X amount of money, go make this movie. And then this movie comes out, and this is so far and above the generic studio comedies at the time. And I'm not putting any of those comedies down. I definitely don't want to, I'm not trying to do that. But what I am saying is that there's a reason why this film stands above the rest, not just because of its extremity. That is one thing. There are plenty of extreme films that are talked about, but are not talked about for their quality. Where I think this is, where I think the majority, because the comedy is so consistent in this film, because there are bizarre character moments, and Rip Torn is so angry and yelling throughout the whole film. I mean, all of his sequences with Gord are ridiculous, but they are so funny because Rip Torn is playing it to such a specific level that whether or not he knew it, I would like to believe he did, but perhaps not, because Rip Torn, in the latter half of his career has kind of been known for, like the Men in Black films and stuff. But people forget, Rip Torn was a solid actor, man. He's like Gary Busey in a way where he gets his reputation, but Gary Busey as well. I mean, he was in films like, Carmy and Big Wednesday, these really good roles, man. And same thing with Rip Torn. He was in like Coming Apart, which is like just such a great film. And of course the Norm Mailer stuff. He was in like Maidstone and... was he? I don't think he was in Wild 90. I don't remember. But either way, I mean, he's so annoyed with him throughout the film, and he has these ridiculous exchanges. There's a whole exchange about Gord. He doesn't want Gord to eat a chicken hamburger or chicken sandwich. A chicken burger at the dinner table because they made meatloaf. It's just the way he says it was killing me. He's like, you're either gonna eat that goddamn meatloaf or you could go to bed. It's like the way he says this dialogue, it is so funny, man. It's so ridiculous. And that's what I'm saying before, and I don't mean to repeat myself, is that films take a while to get into the public, to get that sort of appreciation. Blade Runner and The Thing were box office failures, and I don't know what the critical reception was of those, but I'm saying is that when those came out, I'm sure people toss those aside as well. I'm not putting Freddy Got Fingered on a level of Blade Runner or the thing. What I'm saying, though, is that any film, any art form, any book, any music. I mean, there are films I didn't like 5 years ago that I like now. There are albums and music and and bands I didn't like a couple years ago that I like now, and all this and that. So you need to really kind of step away from the art and give it time to breathe. So that's why I'm saying that I can guarantee you there are much worse films that came out in 2001 that no one remembers or talks about, And so that's why, if this being the worst film, X Insanity, like Cruising being like nominated for one of the worst films, Rambo First Blood Part 2, I mean, what? I don't... That's far more egregious than a film that's not very good getting nominated for, a Best Picture award. There are films that in the past, like, 10 years that I wasn't a fan of that get nominated for Best Picture, and I go, all right, clearly this had some sort of appreciation behind it, and I understand it, and this was a film that was important at the moment. Even talking about now, like Barbie is a film for the moment. Top Gun Maverick was a film for the moment. Mad Max Fury Road was a film for that moment. These big kind of films. Will they stand the test of time? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. It's not my place to say. But at that moment, they were those films, and that's why it's so like I don't follow any of that, man. I mean, like Blonde getting like the worst film of that year. I mean, I know that's a divisive film. People either love it or hate it, and that's completely fine. That's your prerogative. But like, you can't even say the cinematography was good. You can't even say the acting was good. I mean, it just seems like you're putting like, oh, people are dogging on this film, so I'm gonna dog on this film too. It's like, do you even have your own opinion on the film, man? I remember when like Joker came out, people were dogging on that film, and I'm like, when this film got previewed at like screenings and all that, people were loving it, and then it kind of started to get not so great reviews, and people were like, oh, actually, we hate this film now. It's like, brother, have your own opinion on the film. If you love Joker, if you hate Joker, if you like it, dislike it, have your own opinion, man. This is ridiculous. This is like a collective kind of conscience of just like, oh, people don't like the Adam Sandler film, so I'm not going to like him either. People don't like Freddy Got Fingered, I'm not going to like it either. And then, oh, people are liking it now, I'm going to like it now. It's like, art needs to sit with you, man. Any kind of art. And it's, and I'm repeating myself now, I do apologize, but I was laughing so hard when I was watching this film, and this should not have been my kind of film, because this kind of broad, big comedy is not for me. But this film had me in tears at times. The dialogue, the acting, the character. I mean, the points in the film where he's at a fancy restaurant and he's playing the violin. It's ridiculous, man. But I was in tears watching this film, and this is one of my favorite comedies, man. This is so ridiculous, and it's a film that I can watch again and again. I've seen it 3 times now, and I'm still laughing. And worst film ever, worst film of the year. I mean, that's just ridiculous, man. Get out of here with that. I've seen far, far, far more egregious films that aren't even the worst ever, but are just worse than this. So forget all that nonsense. Have your own opinion on art, man. I don't care if every person says this is the worst film ever. If you think it's a great film, stand by it, and vice versa. If everyone's like, this is a masterpiece, I love this film, and you're like, I'm not crazy about this, then you got to stand by that, man. Don't just fall into the collective kind of conscience to, I don't even know why. It's ridiculous. Who are you trying to impress, And anyways, a contemporary film that I watched last night, actually, which, just knocked some things over, here, squeaking of the chair, is a film that I haven't really been hearing a whole lot of talk about, but it's totally my kind of film. It's funny, going from a loud, obnoxious, bombastic Hollywood film to a quiet, light on dialogue, very low-key kind of film that happens to have I would say, bigger star in it. And it's a film that I mean, this is my kind of film, man. This was totally up my alley. This was from, I want to get the names here. This is from director Rachel Lambert, who I think, okay, she directed a couple films previously. She directed the short Kin, and then she did 3 features, Mom Jovi, In the Radiant City, and I Could Feel You Walking. And this was also written by Stephanie Abel Horowitz, Kevin Armento, and Katie Wright Mead. And I'm looking at their filmographies now if I'm familiar with their previous work, and I don't believe I am. I mean, some TV stuff here and there, but either way. So this is it says 2023, but it just got released here. So I'm counting this as 2024, because this played at some festivals last year, actually. Wow, good gosh. Sometimes I Think About Dying. This film stars Daisy Ridley and Dave Merhe. Merheje. I don't know how to say that. Merheje? If you guys haven't caught on yet, I'm not very good with names. And also, popped up in the film, which was great to see, was Brie Elrod. And you're thinking, who the hell is that? Well, brother, if you were keeping up with recent contemporary films, you would know that she played Lexi in Red Rocket, one of my favorite films of recent memory from the great Sean Baker. She was brilliant in that film, was so funny playing off Simon Rex. And this film is very low-key. We have this character, Fran, played by Daisy Ridley, who, was in the Star Wars stuff, and that's not... I saw those first two Star Wars movies, The Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. They're not for me. I'm not the audience for that, and I can't watch a film like that assessing whether or not she's doing a strong job or not. She's given, she's in the middle of this spectacle kind of film. That's just not for me. But here, she plays a very low key character, and I love the location of this film. It's like a seaside sort of. I forgot where it said it takes place, but it's a very kind of like small town. I love the exteriors of just these quiet sort of I almost said quiet sidewalks, these quiet sort of locations where, it's like center of town, and you have like a pub and all that. And she works at this office. She really keeps to herself, man. She doesn't even have a whole lot of dialogue in the film. She works in this office. She, lives by herself. She lives a very kind of banal, sort of mundane sort of life, and she has these kind of visions as well of her in these kind of scenic sort of settings. I think the title is a little misleading because these visions that she has of like being dead in like open fields or like on the beach, that's only a part of it into her psyche, and I don't think that's a really apt representation of the film itself. But we got this new guy one day, Robert, played by Dave Mayer. I'm going to call him Dave M. I don't want to mess up his name because he does such a wonderful job that it'd be a disservice to even pronounce his name incorrectly. They start to warm up to each other in a way that feels very natural because he starts to kind of, he's interested in her, whether romantically or not romantically, it's kind of unclear. You get the idea that he's just kind of being nice to her and all that. And they start to develop something of a friendship where she starts to kind of be more with his friends and all that. And what I like so much about this film is that it feels like a very natural progression. It's a character who is meeting these people and sort of becoming something else, but in a way where it doesn't feel like a flip of the switch. Because even when you get into like the third act of the film, she still feels very reserved. While you can also see the progression of that character from the beginning of the film. There's like just some great parts where, Robert has his own routine where he goes to the cinema and he gets pie after, and he has his little kind of things, and it's great. He's like, what did you think about the film? And she's just very kind of like, oh, I didn't like anything about it. He's like, oh, okay, well, I liked actually a lot about it, And they have a great back and forth. Like I said, Brie Elrod has a small role in the film, and she's great in it as well. And these cast of characters, man, and, the people who work in her office, they all feel very genuine and very real. They talk about like, mundane kind of banal topics that any of us who, work in these kind of jobs, we deal with a lot of these people, just kind of small talk. Hey, how's the weather doing? Oh, hey, I can't eat too much or else, it's going to go right to my stomach and all this and that. But it all comes together very well. Daisy Ridley is such an interesting lead here because I think she's an actor who, it's like you see how good she is in a film like this, and it's almost like I understand being in contemporary, Hollywood spectacle films and the Star Wars stuff, and that's all fine and all, but it's sort of like you almost kind of, you make those films for the money, and then you get a performance like this that it's like, oh wow, no, she's actually a really good actor. I remember her in Murder in the Orient Express, her being a side character on that, but it's like you want to see her do more roles like this, not necessarily like super low key stuff. You don't want to be repetitive and all that and just do these kind of roles, but I don't think that a Star Wars kind of movie really allows a lot of these actors to really kind of showcase how strong of acting they really are. Because even Adam Driver, who's one of my favorite actors working right now, I don't think those films really kind of suit. Those films are not made for performances. They're made for spectacles. They're made for sequences in particular where the characters have to get to this sequence. You're not, and I'm not a dog on the Star Wars movies. I'm 100% definitely not. I mean, they're not for me, but I'm also not looking my nose down on them. I'm just saying that a film like that, or movies like that, I should say, almost kind of hinder, these kind of actors' careers into doing these bigger kind of stuff. Because even like Chloe Zhao, who is one of my favorite filmmakers working, she does the Marvel thing. And it's almost like, gosh, I really hope we get another film like The Rider or Nomadland. I loved both those films, and I didn't see Eternals. I'm sure it's a fine film and all that, but I'm not interested in that. I'm not looking at it as a Chloe Zhao film. I'm looking at it as a Marvel movie with Chloe Zhao, hired for it. She's not giving. You're not going to see a film like The Rider as a Marvel film. It's just not going to happen, man. Time is not on my side yet again. I'm running out of time here. Hey, guys. It's a great day out. It's just we're so happy to be alive. It's such a great time to be alive. We have so many opportunities to take in all this great art. So hey man, think for yourself, watch these films, engage with acquaintances, and have a blessed day, guys. It's such a wonderful life to live, so let's live it. All right, that's all I got. Goodbye.